When Amsterdam was announced, I was blown away by the number of high-profile names that were taking part. I've now seen the movie, so does all that talent make it worth the price of admission? In the 1930s, three friends witness a murder, are framed for it, and uncover one of the most outrageous plots in American history. This stars Christian Bale, Margot Robbie, John David Washington, Andrea Riseborough, Anya Taylor-Joy, Chris Rock, Shannon, Mike Myers, Zoe Saldana, Rami Malek, and Robert De Niro, amongst a whole bunch of other talented actors too. The story follows three best friends that are caught up in a murder and they have to work to clear their names and in the process thwart a devious political plan. Now, this was a mixed bag for me because while there are several things that really did work for me, there are also many things that either didn't work, were clunky, or were just outright bad. And I'll start with the positives. Christian Bale is awesome. I mean, he's quirky and incredibly funny with subtle and sarcastic wit. He's very quick with his retorts, but there are also times when he is silent and barely moving, and he's able to execute some awkwardly humorous physical comedy. Bale stands out above the rest, despite all of the talent that he shares the screen with. And I'm not saying that the others are poo, because there are many that do excellent jobs in their roles also. But Bale, he's just the most consistent throughout, which is noticeable. The dynamic between Bale, Robbie, and Washington, I think it's refreshing and believable. They share this camaraderie that's engaging and sweet. And the friendship that's displayed is great to watch. And the peculiarity that they show, I thought was endearing. I also love the scathing social and political commentary that becomes apparent as the story goes along. The movie uses the backdrop of the 30s to address ideas and behaviors that are happening currently. And while that may not resonate with everybody or even be appreciated, I thought it was great in how pointed it came across. Some of the cinematography is enveloping and it's engaging, with some longer takes and scenes that have the camera locked down on a character to just stare at their face, which then allows us to begin to peer into their minds. But not all of that cinematography works. There are some odd uses of shaky cam as we'll follow a character along, and then there are multiple times where there's a lot of zooming in or out while tilting the lens. And this may have been an attempt at just being unsettling, but it didn't accomplish that. The shots just came across as poorly crafted in these instances. Now there's a mystery at play where the three characters are trying to uncover who really was behind a murder. And I like the idea of this, and it begins to be intriguing until it's not. There is a very distinct point where the mystery loses all obscurity and it becomes painfully obvious what the trajectory is going to be for the whole case and then who's responsible. I mean, the story behaves like it's being clever, especially because there is still at least a third of the movie left. I mean, maybe even more of that. But things then become incredibly obvious. And this leads me to the multiple issues I had with the story and the film overall. Not only is the outcome very predictable, the end of the film actually becomes insulting at how blatantly it feels the need to spell out every single point. I mean, it has to connect every dot as if we are too thick to understand what's been going on. I mean, seriously, the movie actually goes point by point in the reveal while replaying scenes from the movie. I mean, it's like a recap for morons that was unnecessary, and then it added time to an already long story. And then there were sequences that added nothing to that story. I mean, there's a point with Mike Myers and Shannon where they bring up some of their interests. And then later on, Myers has an altercation that has to do with those interests. But that whole thing could be completely cut out, especially because it also then pulls in other characters in other scenes, but it ultimately goes nowhere. And there are several times when the story feels very self-indulgent, that all the ideas were outstanding and all deserving of remaining in the film, even though they weren't and shouldn't. I mean, this made portions of the 2 hours and 14 minutes really drag on. And I don't mind a long movie when the content is compelling. And during the times that were captivating, I didn't feel any time pass at all. But when the story loses its way or the scenes just become redundant, that's when the time became very evident. Now, I have mentioned how well I thought the actors did in this, but something that affected almost all of them was that at some point in their line delivery, it felt like they were cold reading the lines of the script. I mean, I think everybody had at least one scene like this, except for Christian Bale and then maybe Mike Myers. It's like the director told the actors, just read this without emotion. Oh, and you've never seen this line before, so it's okay if it comes across as stilted or even stoic. I mean, each time this happened, it broke me out of the story. It's an odd way to showcase the massive amount of talent, and it's not like that was how they performed throughout the entire movie. I mean, it's just one or two line deliveries each that felt exactly like they were reading off of cue cards, and then only 2 words were visible at a time, and they had no idea what was coming next. The flow was unnatural, and it made me really question why that particular take would be included. Some of the storytelling also feels unnatural. It comes across as choppy and clunky. Now, there's a sequence of events towards the end of the movie where this celebration is taking place. And then we see the crowd and the actions that are occurring within this. There's a speech that begins, and when the camera flashes to the audience, all of a sudden there's this large group of people that weren't previously present. I mean, it's just like they materialized out of thin air. And it was so abrupt without reasoning or explanation that I really thought that it was like a visualization of sentiments, but in something that's not actually occurring. But no, it really was happening in the story. This movie had some promise to it, not only with the talented cast, but by the mystery of the story that was compelling. I mean, it was made even better by the wit and charisma of Christian Bale. But then everything loses the intrigue and it becomes obvious and predictable. And the odd choice of the direction with the dialogue, I thought was distracting and then ineffectual. I mean, the potential was there, it's just not realized. So overall, Amsterdam draws on its expert cast to craft a biting social and political commentary filled with pointed humor, but is ultimately hampered by obvious story choices, repetitive scenes, strange cast direction, and an ending that insults the audience. Christian Bale is the standout in the sea of talent, and while the comedy is intelligent, the film talks down to the viewers in the finale, treating moviegoers as dolts who need every aspect explained in glaringly straightforward detail. I was hoping for more, and while there are points that I did certainly enjoy, the more I sat with this and then thought on the problems, the more I began to dislike the watching experience. I mean, this might be good for a rental at some point, or even when it comes to a streaming service, but I don't recommend rushing out to buy tickets. There's no sex or nudity, some profanity, and a lot of violence. I give Amsterdam 2.5 out of 5 couches. So what's a movie with a huge ensemble cast that you would recommend? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.